Okay, let's dive right into today's explainer. We're exploring a truly fascinating human question today. We're going to step into the shoes of an investigator to figure out what really helps students overcome just incredible odds. We hear about the achievement gap or educational inequality all the time, right? But instead of just staring at the statistics of struggle, we're going to look at the architecture of resilience, the real mystery here. What makes the difference?
To ground this, I want you to picture two students. Both grow up in poor families, both attend crowded public schools, but their paths completely diverge. Imagine a student, let's call her Maria. She wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every single morning to help her mom sell vegetables before school. After school, she's watching her younger siblings while her parents work. At night, she's studying under a single light bulb. And yet, years later, she graduates at the absolute top of her class. It's an incredible, real-world story of hope and struggle.
And this brings us to our core mystery for this explainer. Why do some students, like Maria, manage to succeed despite these intensely difficult circumstances, while others quietly drop out? Most folks assume they know the answer, right? They think, oh, she just worked harder, or she wanted it more. But decades of research actually tell us a completely different, much more complex story. So every chapter we cover today is going to serve as a clue to solving this mystery.
Right, so clue one, poverty's hidden daily obstacles. Our first clue starts with understanding what these students are actually up against. When people hear the word poverty, they almost always immediately think of money. But poverty actually creates these invisible, incredibly heavy daily obstacles. It's a lot like a student carrying an increasingly heavy backpack to school every single day.
Because this backpack isn't just a lack of funds, it's food insecurity, literally wondering if there's going to be dinner on the table tonight. It's housing instability, which research links directly to increased trauma and developmental delays. And then there's this concept called resource dilution. Basically, parents just have to stretch their limited time, energy, and money across multiple siblings, which means less investment available for each kid. Throw in overcrowded classrooms and language barriers for immigrant families, and wow, the weight of that backpack becomes crushing. And just look at the structural gap, $14,000. To put that into perspective, according to the research, that is the average annual income deficit for inner-city students' families compared to suburban families. 14 grand. That financial gap severely limits access to the kind of cultural and social capital that paves the way for academic achievement. So, the big question, how do some students carry this massive backpack and still manage to sprint across the finish line? Well, this brings us to clue two, the power of supportive adults. This right here is really the emotional heart of these success stories. You see, behind almost every quote-unquote self-made student, you'll find the presence of just one supportive adult. It could be a teacher, a parent, a coach, a mentor. Success is rarely a solo mission, which brings up a fascinating psychological phenomenon called the Pygmalion effect. Basically, when a teacher actively believes in a student's potential, they actually, unconsciously, provide way more attention and opportunities to that student. And that expectation alone can trigger massive academic gains. The belief of a caring adult acts like a bridge across those troubled waters. Honestly, sometimes a massive shift in a student's whole life trajectory begins with one simple, transformative sentence. I believe you can do this. Now, a student carrying that heavy backpack of poverty might not buy it at first, but hearing this consistently from a mentor, it helps them finally believe in their own worth. It literally proves that supportive relationships are often a far stronger predictor of success than just sheer willpower alone. Moving right along to clue three, a vision for the future. So when success feels just impossibly far away, how do these students keep going? That's our third clue. Think about it. If nobody in your community has ever attended university or started a business, it's really hard to imagine yourself doing it, right? But there's a stark contrast at play here. Successful students build a vision of a future version of themselves. We see a clear difference between studying just to get arbitrary grades and studying because you are fueled by a clear vision of becoming a scientist, a nurse, or an engineer. That future vision becomes their compass. Suddenly, every difficult assignment, every long night, it gains real meaning because they're studying for a future they can vividly imagine. Okay, clue four, building small daily habits. This leads us to a highly practical piece of our puzzle. What do these high-achieving, disadvantaged students actually do differently every single day? Well, let's debunk a huge myth right now. People assume successful students are just constantly motivated, but the reality? Motivation is fleeting. It comes and it goes.
Daily habits, however, they compound. If you're relying purely on motivation while dealing with housing instability or food insecurity, that's a losing battle. Building resilient, compounding habits is what actually sustains progress.
And these compounding habits, they're usually made up of really simple, quiet actions. We're talking about reading just a little bit each day, reviewing notes right before bed, bravely raising a hand to ask questions when confused, and just showing up consistently. In isolation, these seem tiny, but they act as small drops of water that eventually fill a massive bucket over time. This is the quiet architecture of academic success.
Which brings us to clue 5, the truth about resilience. Look, we all absolutely love a good comeback story, but we need to understand how these students actually recover after inevitable failures. Let's look at what true resilience really is. Because true resilience is definitely not about stoic perfection. The myth is this student who never fails, never cries, and never gets overwhelmed. The reality, as Dr. Carol Dweck's famous growth mindset theory shows, it's about learning to adapt and rebound after a major setback. It's failing an exam and trying again. It's realizing that resilience isn't some innate trait you're just born with, it's a skill you develop. But here's the catch. We can't just demand psychological resilience without providing physical support. Notice how spaces like hallways, classrooms, cafeterias, and bathrooms can often cause the most stress for dysregulated students. The research on trauma-informed design in schools shows that by physically creating enabling spaces that lower environmental stress, we actually give students the capacity to practice the psychological resilience we're asking of them. It's absolutely crucial. All right, we've arrived at clue 6, why opportunities truly matter. Our final clue keeps our entire investigation completely honest. We have to look at why individual effort must intersect with real-world opportunities. Because we have to acknowledge systemic realities here. There is a documented brain drain that strips both rural and urban areas of human capital and resources. Because of this structural disparity, hard work alone sometimes just isn't enough. A scholarship, access to a special program, or a well-timed innovation is often the vital key that unlocks all that hard work. Acknowledging that opportunity matters doesn't diminish a student's effort at all. It just highlights exactly why we must create more pathways for them. Okay, so let's look at the complete picture. The crucial point now is synthesizing all these clues we've gathered on this journey together. We started with one central question: what makes the difference? As we can see, success is rarely the result of one single factor. It's a beautiful, complex combination. It often emerges from the emotional foundation of supportive relationships, the practical scaffolding of systemic opportunities, the mental flexibility of resilience, the compounding power of daily habits, and the guiding light of future hope. When all these elements align, incredible things happen, even despite that heavy backpack of poverty. Understanding this leaves us with one incredibly powerful thought to close on. Somewhere out there right now, a student is studying while carrying burdens most of us will never even see. They might not have the best resources, but they still have dreams. If we know that one supportive adult or one well-timed opportunity can completely change a life, how many future scientists, leaders, and teachers are just waiting for someone to believe in them tonight? Thank you so much for exploring this vital mystery with me on today's Explainer.